There were so many people who voted for and really believed in the message of change and constitutional governance and budgetary discipline that Governor Landry, then candidate AG Landry, was putting forward. And a lot of us really feel that we're not getting what we thought we were getting. And a lot of those promises are starting to ring really hollow in people's ears. And we just wanted to lay out for people what has been claimed and what has actually taken place. And I think that's very important.
Thank you for joining us once again on the State of Freedom.
The State of Freedom is a listener-supported podcast. We are committed to pursuing the truth about policymaking, regulatory actions, and political maneuvers in Louisiana and at the national level that stand to impact your freedoms.
Please support the State of Freedom by becoming a monthly supporter or member of the Warrior Circle, or by advertising your business, your nonprofit, or your event with us. Go to freedomstate.us. We are bypassing the mainstream media cartel and the establishment political parties in Louisiana and coming directly to you, spreading the uncensored voice of freedom across Louisiana and beyond. Pokey Claw, right here in Mid-City in Baton Rouge. It's Baton Rouge's newest claw machine arcade. Jenin absolutely loves it. Packed with Pokemon gear and fun for all ages. You got to go to Pokey Claw. I love it. Jenin wants to go there every Saturday. It's just a wonderful place to go for the family, for the kids. Pokey Claw.
Jeff Landry came into office promising to reform Louisiana government. He promised to fight fraud, waste, and abuse of your tax dollars. He promised to make government more efficient and more accountable to you. He promised structural reform that would change the way Louisiana operates for the better. We're 2.5 years in, so what's the fruit of those promises? What happened with Louisiana DOGE? What was really behind the push for a constitutional convention, and who did Landry want driving it? And who did he choose to put in some of the most important positions in Louisiana government? There's a very big difference between talking about reform and actually delivering it. Today, we are asking a very simple question. After all these promises, what has Louisiana actually gotten? This is the State of Freedom. I'm Danielle Walker. It is Tuesday, August 25th. It's 10 a.m. I'm joined by my friend and co-host, the Watchdog-in-Chief, the indomitable Chris Alexander, and we're coming to you live on Voice of the People USA. We tried to come to you live today on Facebook and YouTube, but it failed, and I'm sensing a big theme about when it fails for us on YouTube and Facebook. But you can catch us live now on Rumble and X, so hopefully we'll get an announcement up shortly to the folks on YouTube and on Facebook that they can catch us here. And you can always catch us later on our audio-only platforms if you miss us here. We'd love for you to do that. And if you are, wherever you're watching this and whenever you're watching this, give us a thumbs up. Put something in the comments. Let us know what you think about what we're saying. We are always striving to bring you the truth and hopefully having fun while we do it. Hopefully lifting your spirits while we do it. Sometimes making you angry while we're doing it.
I don't know about you, but I'm having fun. I hope you are.
I'm having a great time. I wish our stream didn't fail on Facebook and YouTube this morning, but it feels like that is sometimes just par for the course. So, yeah.
What is going on with that?
Hopefully our team will get a quick note out to everybody on Facebook to move over to Rumble and X. Why don't we start with the scripture of the day? It sounds like we need it. We always need
indeed.
It. All right.
Absolutely.
Here we go. It's 1 Corinthians chapter 3, verses 5 through 8. And it says, let's see. Okay. Who is Apollos really? Or who is Paul? Aren't we both just servants through whom you believed our message? Aren't each of us doing the ministry the Lord has assigned to us? I was the one who planted the church, and Apollos came and cared for it, but it was God who caused it to grow. This means the one who plants is not anybody special, nor the one who waters, for God is the one who brings the supernatural growth. Now the one who plants and the one who waters are equally important and on the same team, but each will be rewarded for his own work. And I was thinking about that this morning. You know, we all have our place and we all have different gifts and skills, and the Lord is the one who gives us those and who instructs us in where we should direct those for the work he has us to do. And it's the Lord who causes our work to succeed and prosper. You know, it's fine for us to admire the work and talents of other people. I think that's often really an inspirational thing to do, but it's important that we keep that in perspective and don't neglect the work that God's called us to do, and don't look down on the work we're called to do, because none of us has the right to say that the Lord has given us something that's too small or too insignificant. If he didn't think it was important, he wouldn't have given it to us. He wouldn't have given us that skill. He wouldn't have given us that assignment. So the body of Christ takes and needs all of its members healthy and working in alignment with the instruction of Holy Spirit. And it's vital to remember who causes our work to succeed. It is the Lord himself. And I love the way that it's said in Moses' prayer in Psalm 90, verse 17. It says it this way in the Passion Translation. O Lord our God, let your sweet beauty rest upon us and give us favor. Come work with us, and then our works will endure, and give us success in all we do. So I think that's my prayer for us all this morning, that we would have a recognition of the work that God's called us to do. We would be grateful for it. We'd be excited about it and passionate about it, and that we would do it with full joy.
Do it all with joy, all with full joy. You know, Danielle, your discussion of the scripture about not sort of belittling our own efforts, certainly not neglecting our own efforts because we're too busy admiring or in awe of things that other people are doing. It reminded me of the scripture where the lady, the widow, I believe, they're all in the synagogue and everybody is giving all this money in the synagogue. And one lady comes up with the last dime or the last penny that she has, and she donates that. And who did Jesus focus on in that scene? He didn't focus on all the rich people who were giving out of their largesse. He was focused on, and he was most poignantly moved by the lady who gave the least amount, but it was the last that she had. And that's what Jesus focuses on. He focuses on what's in the heart, and he doesn't evaluate every effort or every exertion of our energy based upon the objective thing that somebody does. Something can look like it's a very small thing, but the angels in heaven can rejoice far more if someone is giving even a smaller amount, or even their effort appears to be smaller if it requires them to sacrifice more or to make more of an effort. So we can never belittle the things that we can do in our own sphere just because they may appear to be small or meaningless or insignificant, because nothing is insignificant to God. And in fact, in many situations, I think that God is honored more, perhaps when people do less, if it requires more of them and more of their own personal sacrifice. So we just have to remember in our own sphere, in our own way, to do what we can each day to try to advance the kingdom and to create a healthier society. And I'll always be reminded of that scripture, and I hope it speaks to people this morning.
Yeah, and Chris, you know what comes to mind as you say that? The sacrifice is a signal of faith, right? People don't sacrifice for no reason. And so I think faith is the currency of the kingdom. Faith is what moves the heart of God. The faith of that little boy who gave his 2 fishes and 5 loaves to Jesus was able to be multiplied and feed 5,000 plus women and children. So the widow's mite, that one little coin that she had to give, she gave it in sacrifice out of faith that the Lord had something that he wanted to do with that. And who knows how much that was able to multiply and do.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's such a great point. Such a great point. His ways are above ours. One thing we do know is that God doesn't evaluate human actions, human sacrifice in the same way that we do.
Yeah.
And we just have to remember to look at things through God's eyes. And some things that appear to be very, very small and meaningless to the world may have the angels in heaven rejoicing because of that one small sacrifice.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, this morning, Chris, we have a lot of territory to cover, and I just want to maybe frame it out a little bit. We wanted to talk about LA DOGE. We wanted to talk about the 2024 Landry's proposed constitutional convention, and we wanted to talk about some out-of-state appointments that he made to his cabinet. And the heart behind all of this really is to say, there were so many people who voted for and really believed in the message of change and constitutional governance and budgetary discipline that Governor Landry, then candidate AG Landry, was putting forward. And a lot of us really feel that we're not getting what we thought we were getting. And a lot of those promises are starting to ring really hollow in people's ears. And we just wanted to lay out for people what has been claimed and what has actually taken place. And I think that's very important. And I'm sure there are people who say, well, aren't you a Republican? Shouldn't you just get on the team and champion the good work that is being done? And I'm sure there is some good work being done, Chris, and we're not shy to give credit where credit is due, when credit is due, even to people that we are typically very much on the opposite side of, on many things, right? But we have to stand with truth, because we cannot go into an election cycle next year with people under the impression that the promises have been fulfilled, under the impression that the work that was put forward is the work that has been done. And I also think that part of us pulling back the curtain on the way this administration has been operating from the very beginning helps people understand how we got to these NDAs that are just shocking people. You can't go into a community in Louisiana right now where people are not absolutely shocked that their legislators would do these, sign these NDAs to bring these big developments behind the people's backs. And I think that was really one of the key drivers for us saying, you know what, maybe we ought to go back to the beginning and see how this all started out.
Absolutely, and that's exactly what we did. And I do think the NDAs are a driver, because people are coming to the realization that their government is acting in collusion with big corporate special interests to hide things from them that they have every right to know about, things that directly affect them. And so I think becoming aware of these non-disclosure agreements that are being signed by elected officials really is having a resonating or a domino effect on people, because they're saying, if my government is acting in collusion to hide things that directly affect me and that are of profound public import, not only for me, but for my kids and the next generation, what else is my government willing to do? What else is my government willing to hide? What else is my government willing to lie to me about? So I think the linchpin of all of this that I really think has set the people aflame really is these NDAs.
Yeah.
And quite frankly, Danielle, it doesn't even matter ultimately if these non-disclosure agreements or these secret agreements are concealing things that may ultimately be good for the citizens. The fact of the matter is the government is supposed to serve the people, and you're not allowed to hide things from the people that affect them. Their tax dollars, their resources, their land, their health, their environment. You just can't do it in a constitutional republic. And so I believe that these NDAs, even though they're very unpleasant, very unsavory, I believe the silver lining is that they really, I believe, are going to wake citizens up across the board on a wide range of things that our government is doing, and ultimately going to cause them to be more suspicious of the government in principle, which, as I've said before, Danielle, our founding fathers constantly warned about being eternally vigilant, eternally watchful over the government, and eternally skeptical of everything that the government says and does. So I believe that the end result of all of this is going to be a more transparent government and a more engaged and awake citizenry generally.
Yeah, I agree with that, Chris. And as I think about all that we have unpacked to get to today's episode, all I can think of is, my only king is Jesus. My only king is Jesus. It is not a governor of the state of Louisiana, and it is not a state legislator or a state senator. So I want us to expose this in a way that says these elected officials are sent to Baton Rouge to better the state on behalf of the people. They are not sent there to conceal. They are not sent there to lie. They are not sent there to paint a rosy picture of our finances. They are sent there to tell us the truth and to make decisions on our behalf. And when we keep that in focus, I think we can become very clear-eyed about the messages that we're receiving. And frankly, we can have a little less grace when it comes to the messages we're receiving. And I mean that with all respect. I mean that with as honest of a heart as I can, Chris, because don't sit there and lie to my face when your job was to go there and be an honorable person who's there to speak the truth. And if you can't get the job done, just tell us the truth. Don't make up a story about it.
Exactly. And that is exactly what has occurred in large part, Danielle, with regard to the big DOGE, LA DOGE that was set up by the governor by executive order, in which that supposedly the governor and his task force looked under the hood of 17 state departments, 17 agencies in Louisiana, did all kinds of streamlining, budget reductions, money saving, and then at the end of it, said and proclaimed that they had saved taxpayers in Louisiana $1 billion in annual waste without touching really a single public service. If that is the case, let me tell you what, that's a masterclass in fiscal conservatism. There's no question about it, but it doesn't add up, Danielle. We've done a close and a very deep dive on this, and this was not a breakthrough, LA DOGE, in government efficiency or government reduction or streamlining. I think it's more like, in large part, a masterclass in misleading political theater, for lack of a better word. That's what it comes down to. A political theater that really does not bear close scrutiny, And
Chris,
go ahead.
maybe we can start at the end. I do want to show a clip of Governor Landry at the press conference at the closure of LA DOGE, which happened in January of this year. And before we do that, just remind folks that how we got here. So when President Trump came into office, he announced DOGE. That was obviously with a very big splash, and Elon Musk and big balls and a team of
I remember big balls.
A team of all kinds of tech savvy people going in, and it had big promises. And a lot of people have been feel let down by DOGE as well. A lot of people feel like there should have been greater savings made at the federal level as well.
And then maybe Elon Musk shouldn't have been fired?
Well, maybe, but they did successfully shut down USAID, which was basically the central nexus of where so much fraud was taking place.
Yes.
A ton of fraudulent payments were being made, or it wasn't so much, I guess there was fraud, but it was money that's going against the interest of the country.
And lining the pockets of NGOs.
Yeah, absolutely. Who were acting in direct conflict with the interests of a free society. So maybe, I know that LA DOGE was set up because people like you and I, Chris, started hollering and saying, well, look, what's good for the goose is good for the gander. If they can look at fraud, waste, and abuse, I bet there's some that can be found here in our state. And so with a lot of
not only look at fraud, waste, and abuse, Danielle, but actually eliminate it.
Yeah, that's a great distinction, Chris. And so there was the establishment of the announcement of an LA DOGE, and I believe there were 6 legislators that were a part of it, 3 from the Senate and 3 from the House. I don't remember all their names. I know Valerie Hodges and Blake Miguez were on there, and forgive me, I don't recall everyone else who got named. But why don't we just start here, if you're good with it, Chris, at the end with this Landry's kind of recap of LA DOGE.
Yeah, this is the end, and this is when he's proclaiming victory.
Like the citizens of this state, our government has had to live under Biden-era inflation. When you go to the grocery store or the hardware store and pay those prices, which went up under then President Joe Biden, our state government must pay those increased prices as well. But despite that Biden inflation, we didn't increase taxes to increase spending. We created efficiencies. More importantly, we not only did not increase taxes, myself and the legislature, delivered to the people of this state the largest tax cut ever in the history of this state. And we're not done. I'm standing here to reiterate that my long-term goal is to eliminate the income tax in this state once and for all. And we can eliminate it all while doing the great things that we've been doing, like fighting crime, building on some of the best educational wins and improvements in the nation.
All right, you get the point.
Danielle, it's first of all, look, this doesn't really have to do specifically with DOGE, which is what we're talking about. But as we've talked about before, Governor Landry did not deliver the largest tax cut in Louisiana history. He did reduce personal income tax to a flat tax. He did reduce the corporate franchise tax, no question about that. But we raised the sales tax in Louisiana and expanded it to include digital streaming services, online services. And we currently sit in Louisiana at the highest combined state and local sales tax in America at 10 or 11%. So
and Chris,
at the same time,
one quick thing to insert there. I was digging into that a little bit over the last couple days and found that I don't know if it was said the legislature, or Governor Landry, or just the state of officials were relieved and surprised, something like that, to see that revenue increased in 2025. State revenue increased in 2025 after the tax cuts. Well, how did that happen? Because they weren't tax cuts.
So you deliver the largest tax cut in Louisiana history, apparently, yet revenue to the government from taxpayers increases.
That's not a tax cut.
How do you reconcile those two things? The other point I wanted to make, Danielle, is this. He talks about wanting to eliminate the state income tax. Over the past 20 years, and I know Landry wasn't governor all those years, there have been so many opportunities, so many bills brought forward to eliminate the state income tax, at least 3 or 4 that I can think of while Governor Landry was governor. Several would have immediately ended the Louisiana state income tax, but there was one by Dixon McMakin that would have phased it out over a 10-year period. Phased it out, which we didn't really like the bill. We didn't think it needs to take 10 years to eliminate the state income tax. But nonetheless, that was one of the bills that was on the table. That also was defeated. So Governor Landry, if you want to end the Louisiana state income tax, why did you not make sure that a plan that would have phased it out over a 10-year period was defeated? So there's so much talk about ending the state income tax in Louisiana, but there's no action on it. It's only discussion and more discussion and more discussion, but nothing ever gets done with regard to eliminating the state income tax in Louisiana. Yeah. So, it's difficult to take the governor seriously or at face value when he says that, because the actions do not back up the words.
Yeah, and this was a press conference at the closure of LA DOGE. And so he was, the reason I wanted to bring that clip, Chris, is because he was saying that this was all, LA DOGE was building toward the ability for us to get rid of the state income tax for once and for all. Now, the claim made in the rest of the press conference and widely reported on by Louisiana news outlets is that close to $1 billion of savings were found, annualized, right? So year on year, every year, $1 billion is being saved. Now, that's just on its face disingenuous. I mean, we found that between 6 and 603 million of that billion, so 60%, was Medicaid and SNAP money. And so they were taking federal money. They were taking ineligible people off of the rolls. Now, that's great work, and I appreciate that work. That money is not money that's being saved by state taxpayers. It's not money that's going into the general fund, right? This is federal money. And this was not even initiatives of the state, right? These were dictates from the federal government that said, hey, states, if you want to remain eligible, if you want to still get Medicaid dollars from us and SNAP dollars from us for your people, you got to clean up these things. You got to do X, Y, and Z. And so while I appreciate the effort that was done, to roll it into a broader DOGE effort to me is just extremely disingenuous.
It is extremely disingenuous. I mean, as you said, the $600 million, 60% of the $1 billion that supposedly was saved and will be saved annually was federal money tied to Medicaid and SNAP food benefits. So, that money is not money that's generated by Louisiana taxpayers to the Louisiana government that's going to be saved and going into a general fund. That just means that the federal government is sending us $600 million for Medicaid and for SNAP. It doesn't, the idea that we've saved $600 million because of this, that's going to be in the Louisiana General Fund that we can use to fund infrastructure in Louisiana, roads, bridges, or whatever it is simply false. That's just $600 million that we're not getting anymore from the federal government.
Yeah.
So how can you say that because of Louisiana DOGE, we've saved Louisiana taxpayers $600 million? It's just flatly untrue. That's just not true.
So that leaves us with $300 to $400 million that are actual savings, right? And if you want to look at it in with respect to to the entire Louisiana annual budget, the annual budget of Louisiana is between $45 and $53 billion. So out of $45 to $53 billion, Chris, there were $300 to $400 million in savings. That is under 1%. That's about 0.8% of the entire Louisiana budget. To me, that says they didn't even scratch the surface. Because even if we took their $1 billion at face value, it would still be only about 2% of the state budget. I think if anyone looks around at the state, they can see very clearly, without too much help, you really don't need professional support to be able to see that fraud is happening. You may need professional support to be able to tackle the issue effectively. But Chris, 1%, less than 1% of the budget.
Less than 1% of the budget. And let's talk about that. The $300 million or so that they're claiming has been saved because of this Medicaid eligibility cleanup, the SNAP cleanup. This was, you recall, Danielle, that during COVID, the federal government said that nobody can be eliminated from Medicaid during COVID because of that emergency. The federal government blocked states from removing anyone from Medicaid at that time. But since then, since COVID ended, the federal government made a requirement that every state in America was legally required by federal law at that point to audit the rolls and remove ineligible recipients. That was a federal mandate. You know, a number of people were dropped off the Medicaid rolls in Louisiana. Again, was not a voluntary initiative by DOGE. That was a federal mandate. It was, you know, and that would have been done and had to be done whether or not DOGE was ever formed. And so not only did we not need DOGE to do that, again, it was a federal requirement where they were looking for metrics. They were going to scrutinize that. You had to do it. So to say that because of the big DOGE effort and this voluntary initiative on the part of fiscal hawks in Louisiana appointed by governor, we've saved $300 million in Medicaid and SNAP benefits, again, is disingenuous. It's misleading.
Yeah. And a couple of other problems, verification and methodology. So these savings were self-reported, and their estimates, right? These are not a product of full, independent, third-party public audits with line item receipts. So, for instance, we get categories like process efficiency and service and workforce optimization, including reorganization, consolidation, eliminating duplications. That's giving us $407.6 million in savings. But we don't get to know what departments got reorganized under DOGE. We don't get to know what processes were made more efficient under DOGE. So technology services is allegedly giving us $68.4 million in savings. How? What contracts? What subscriptions did we cancel? We don't know. Leases, $3 million. Can we know what leases were canceled? Well, it's not listed for the public here. Utilization of assets, $9.6 million. What does that even mean, Chris?
I don't have any idea what that means. It is, but your point, Danielle, is that this was, I mean, they're basically grading their own homework. If a big corporation in America announced to their shareholders, Danielle, or to the people of America, that they'd saved $1 billion and will be saving $1 billion annually, what is the first thing that people like Joe Hoft, who used to do forensic financial audits for corporations, would do? What's the first thing he would do? He would say, let me do an independent third-party audit to itemize specifically where these cuts have occurred so I can let the shareholders know specifically where we're saving money. Did DOGE do that? Absolutely not. It was all self-attesting. They didn't get any objective third-party forensic examination of this to look at the hard numbers and to determine specifically where and how we are saving all this money. What the administration actually did was they spent another $3 million in Louisiana taxpayer funds exclusively on outside consultants that were hired by the governor to run the initiative and run these numbers. So the people who were creating who had a vested interest in saving all this money were the very people who were hired to report this and to find these supposed savings.
I have a problem with that. I don't have a problem with that as long as we get savings. And to be fair, I mean, I laud the effort, right? I laud the goal. Anyway, I'm not sure how much I'm going to laud the effort, but I will laud the goal. It is something that we need to do in our state, but I just feel like it has not been meaningfully addressed. There's some things that you and I have talked about on more than one occasion, Chris. How many nonprofits, NGOs are in the state budget that actually go to fund politicians, foundations that do work called lining those politicians' pockets or their family members' pockets. Are you kidding me? We didn't have anybody that wanted to take a look at that. What about, and what was the other thing that we were talking about this morning that I was really upset about? It's going to circle back for me.
Well, you were talking about just now about all these NGOs, right?
Yeah, but there was one other thing that really, really got me, and it's going to recirculate. Don't worry. It's Monday morning or Tuesday morning. It'll come back, whatever day it is.
It'll be there. But Danielle, the bottom line point here is that
the commissions and the boards. You always talk about how many commissions and boards the state of Louisiana has. Were any of those consolidated? No.
500 regulatory boards and commissions in Louisiana, funded by the taxpayers. Have any of those been streamlined? Have any of those been eliminated? Has there been any consolidation of services with all the duplicative services that exist in Louisiana? I don't believe that was touched. But the fundamental point that the viewers need to remember here, Danielle, with regard to all of these projected annualized savings of $1 billion, is that there has not been any granular line-by-line itemization of which contracts have been eliminated, which leases, as you said, Danielle, have been broken, or how the workforce optimization that he talks about that supposedly is going to save $400 million was done without firing or eliminating any positions at all. No itemization, no nothing. It's a black box of internal projections and guesses that have not been subject to any scrutiny, any forensic audit, any verification whatsoever. And that is the problem. And just getting back to my point, if a corporation announced to its shareholders who are wondering where all the money's going, what you're spending our shareholder money on, and said, okay, we're going to be saving you $1 billion annually going forward. And they said, well, great, send us the itemization, show us specifically where the cuts are occurring, let us see the hard numbers. And the corporation said, sorry, we don't have them. These are just projected estimates. We don't have actual empirical data to back it up. What do you think those shareholders would do? Well,
right.
We're the shareholders. We are the shareholders, the taxpayers in Louisiana, and yet we've not been provided any empirical data, any real itemization, any forensic justification for this $1 billion of savings that the governor and DOGE are saying we're getting here in Louisiana. I think it's absolutely unbelievable that that would be the case. They are self-attesting to this with no verification. And of course, they have a vested interest in saying this. What politician does not want to say, what governor does not want to say, DOGE got down to it, we really looked at the numbers, we really made some hard decisions, and we're going to save Louisiana taxpayers $1 billion every year. The taxpayers say, okay, well, where? How? How are we doing this? What's been cut? What's been streamlined? What's been reduced? And they can't provide the itemization. Why
Chris,
is that?
One other thing, and we can move on from this here in a second, but not one person was fired. Not one single person was fired. Are you telling me that in all of the state of Louisiana's sprawling bureaucracy, there's not one person to fire? Are you kidding me? And also want to mention that the reason we're harping on this, the way that the reporting came out about this without any line items, is because this fits the broader trust us pattern of this administration. I mean, I wish I would have clipped it, and we can play it next time we come on, Chris, of Governor Landry at a recent press conference where A.G. Murrell was standing right next to him, and he said, you know, we had to sign these NDAs. One member of the press was saying, you know, what do you have to say about these NDAs? Do you understand that people have problems with them? And he said, well, what do the people need to know that they don't already know? And you're like, well, how can we know if we don't know? Like,
yeah, the reporter says, okay, well, and Governor Landry says, so what do you want to know? What do you want to know that you don't? What do you want to know that you don't know? You know, he goes, well, we don't know because we can't see the non-disclosure agreements. And Governor Landry says, well, you know everything that you know everything. And the reporter says, so what's the point of signing an NDA? And Governor Landry says, exactly. It's like, exactly. So you're agreeing with the reporter that these non-disclosure agreements are at best totally unnecessary and at worst are actually hiding important details that taxpayers have a right to know. It was just a bizarre exchange that I couldn't really make any sense of, on the part of the governor. It was unbelievable. I've seen that clip.
And I wanted to round
Yeah.
out real quick, Chris, on this, just to say, what does this mean for Louisiana taxpayers, right? When we looked into it, we found very generalized statements of Governor Landry saying that these savings are allowing for budget flexibility, allowing us to avoid falling off a fiscal cliff, that this supports already enacted tax cuts and funding improvements of, like, the biggest thing that it said that these savings were going to go to pay for new OMV upgraded technology, which we know they need it because they were hacked and most likely China got all of our data. And then the long-term goal of eliminating the state income tax. I don't know how you're going to eliminate the state income tax with $400 million of savings.
Exactly. Yes. I mean, it's not even going to come close. It's just a drop in the bucket. But before we move on, Danielle, the viewers need to know, just based upon everything that we've seen here, this was really DOGE, and the final report that the governor came out with at the end is really a political branding exercise more than anything else. It took a federally mandated Medicaid cleanup, combined it with a lot of internal department reshuffling, moving people around, and then labeled these projections as cash savings for Louisiana citizens, completely glossing over the fact, as we said at the beginning, that 60% of this money is just federal aid that's no longer coming to our state. Those aren't internal savings because of cost reduction in the state of Louisiana. So they get to write the report. They get to attest to the veracity of the report. There's no independent verification of the report, and we're just supposed to believe everything that we're told. And it just does not withstand close scrutiny. I would love to get a Joe Hoft or someone like that to be hired to come in and really look at this and say, what are the net savings, annual savings to Louisiana taxpayers that will be in the general fund of our state government as a result of LA DOGE, and figure out what the actual figure is there.
How much money do you think we could save, Chris, if we had an independent auditor go into the budget and say, okay, now let's just go ahead and automatically cut every single contract that is tied somehow to a family member of a politician or to the family of a donor?
Well, John Fleming has mentioned 2 or 3 to us where things have been allocated by the legislature that have gone to him, and he thought it was very, very suspicious because the legislator who was appropriating it or moved to appropriate it, their son, their daughter, their relative basically is the one receiving the money. There wasn't a competitive bid done on whatever project or contract was being negotiated, and John Fleming said, sorry, I can't in good conscience sign this, and I'm not going to do it. And he's done that several times. So I think that's an outstanding point that you make, Danielle, to closely scrutinize the extent to which these politicians are directly or indirectly benefiting from these appropriations.
Yeah. All right. Shall we move to the Constitutional Convention?
Yeah.
Okay. So in 2024, right after taking office, one of the very first things we saw was that out of the gate, Governor Landry was very interested in having a constitutional convention. He talked about this a lot on his on his campaign, right? That was part of his stump speech, one of his pillars, really reducing a lot of the thickness of the Constitution, because a lot of things have been put in there over the years that truly do not need to be in the Constitution. A lot of them probably are better put in statute. We know that the budget is very difficult to manage in Louisiana because a lot of it is protected in the Constitution. So he proposed a constitutional convention. I can't recall who brought it that first time, Chris. I know Dixon McMakin has brought it at least once. I don't recall who brought it in 2024, but the proposed makeup was going to be all 144 state legislators, and then Governor Landry had a list of 27 people that he also intended to nominate as additional delegates to a state constitutional convention. And I mean, fortunately, the convention did not succeed. You and I was very much more opposed to it than you were at the time, and I've only gotten more opposed to it over time. My opposition was, we can't trust that any of our state reps or state officials, for that matter, were lawfully elected. If you believe that there are problems with our elections, it's impossible for anyone to validate that they were rightfully, lawfully, transparently, accurately put into office. So I don't think that we need to trust those people to jack around with the Constitution. That was my starting point. Now, as time has gone on, I don't trust the people that would be part of this, in large part, to mess with the Constitution at all, because of we've seen their fruit over the last 2.5 years. Your opposition, you felt differently, perhaps. What was your reaction to the convention at the time? I know your thoughts were not quite as strong as mine on whether we should move forward with a convention.
My position on that, Danielle, was that we need to know very specifically what the parameters are, what they are allowed to amend, what provisions of the Constitution they're allowed to amend, and what they are restricted from touching, what they cannot do. We're not going to have a situation where the parameters are so loosely described that we have 144 legislators, all of whom, by the way, Danielle, are beholden to our governor because of the way that our constitutional system is set up in Louisiana. He has czar-like power over these legislators. Everybody knows that. You see it every single year when these legislators do not push back against whatever the governor wants because they're afraid of retaliation from the governor. So we have the concern was, we need to know for sure what is going to be, first of all, what the governor himself articulates in writing the provisions are and the parameters are, and what exactly is going to be touched in the Constitution in this convention, so we don't end up with a runaway convention where they're going in there, for instance, and eliminating the constitutional requirement that every vote in Louisiana that's cast must be publicly counted and preserved inviolate in the event of a challenge. Now, our election system does not honor the Constitution right now. We violate the Constitution with every election that we have in Louisiana. But that notwithstanding, we certainly don't want to be in a situation where we go in and that provision in the Constitution is gutted out of there. Because
exactly.
The parameters about what they can do and not do at a convention have not been clearly outlined, and they're not constrained by it.
And
so
Chris, one point on that, you just reminded me that it was Representative Beau Boyer that brought that constitutional convention bill that year, I'm pretty sure, because that's the exact point we brought up to him on a phone call. And he said, everyone is trying to have their issue preserved. And I've already created so many, I don't remember exactly the term he used, but like he'd fenced off so many things that the delegates would not be able to touch. He wasn't sure that he would be able to do that one.
Right, exactly. Yeah. So we would have gone into the convention with the provision that we're talking about right now as far as elections being vulnerable and being open. I was never satisfied that the parameters and the scope of this convention were very clearly defined, and that creates a very vulnerable and a very dangerous situation insofar as the Louisiana Constitution. I'll be the first to tell you, Danielle, that there are many things in the Constitution that should be excised from it. Our Constitution has been amended so many times since 1973. I mean, it's been amended numerous times. So in order to put things in the Constitution that really don't belong there, that really belong in statute. So we do need to do need to reform the Constitution. We need to clean up our Constitution, but I'm not going to go along with this until we know specifically what the parameters are. Is this just a playground for people to go in and do what they want and toy with the Constitution in any way they want, or are they going to be held to a specific rubric and a specific scope of activity in that Constitution? That was my objection, and I was never satisfied, ever,
and I'm
that we
very
received that.
Looking back on it, we're so blessed that it didn't happen, because we can see what they have done and the doubling down effort on using eminent domain for economic development. Imagine if that had been something that was toyed with. The other point I want to bring out, Chris, is
that, Daniel, but I have to compliment you on the point that you just made, because our Constitution is the strongest right now in the United States with respect to the ability of private corporations to expropriate private property for private corporate economic benefit. It is very, very strong. And what would have stopped people who want to push CCS in Louisiana and want to push all these data centers in Louisiana from going in and amending that provision of the Constitution? Absolutely nothing, because you have a governor who wants it. You have legislators who want it. We've not been able to pass one bill in the House or in the Senate to protect private property in Louisiana from eminent domain, from these private corporations. The only thing that ultimately, hopefully, will give victory to these landowners in Louisiana and reassert in a court, after spending $100,000, private property rights in Louisiana, a vindication of the Constitution, is precisely the Louisiana Constitution and how it's written. So what would have stopped them from going in there and amending that? Once again, nothing. I had to compliment you on that point. It's an excellent, excellent point.
Well, thanks, Chris. The other point I want to make is the reason we've had so many amendments to the Constitution is because of the relationship between the legislature and the governor. If our governor didn't have so much power and so much sway over the legislature, they would not be feeling the need to pass what could easily be a statute as a constitutional amendment. They have, because of the governor's weight, and because of his very fat veto pen, this is exactly why we have the situation with our Constitution we have now. And what we've seen out of the way that Governor Landry conducts and leads through this governorship is that he is not behaving in any way differently from his predecessors when it comes to throwing his weight around and being an imperial governor. And so to say that this would have been a positive exercise that was going to bring more freedom to the people of the state of Louisiana is just laughable.
Yes. And the idea that the Constitution would have been amended in any way that reduced the disproportionate power under our constitutional structure that the governor has, I guarantee you that would not have happened. And I think at this point too, Danielle, over the last 2 or 3 years, there have been many constitutional amendments that have been put directly to the people in a statewide vote. The vast majority of those proposed constitutional amendments have been voted down by the people. The governor himself suffered a humiliating loss in March of 2025, I believe it was,
yeah.
4 proposed constitutional amendments, all of which were bad. We opposed every one of them for many different reasons, and they were voted down by the citizens in this state in a 2-to-1 vote. So who's to say, and this is probably what's going on, well, let's go have a constitutional amendment and convention, and let's do it that way. Let's just go in and do it that way. And we don't have to submit these amendments to the people. We'll just go in and do it that way. So I think, honestly, this is something that should never be done until, once again, we know exactly what is being proposed, what is on the table, and what is clearly off limits. Until we get that, until I get that, I'm not going to support a constitutional convention. And I know your reason for doing it is, as you said earlier, get the election system straight, and then we'll go in and see if we can do something legitimately there.
Yeah. Yeah, I had another point to make, but it flew away. So hopefully it'll come back, Chris. Oh, I know what it was. Is there a bigger indication that the representatives, by and large, of the Louisiana legislature, the representatives of the people, are not representing the people than when they send these constitutional amendments to ballot and they get unceremoniously voted down time and time again? To me, that is the biggest indicator that the legislature is completely out of touch and not serving the interests or the will of the people.
Absolutely. Because even though you can argue, Danielle, the legislator, in response to what you're saying, is saying, look, we're not voting for or against this. We're just putting it before the people. But when you put constitutional amendments before the people and the ballot language that you've drafted is totally misleading or just outright fabrications that people are reading, they don't really know what they're voting on because the language they're reading on the ballot when they vote does not adequately represent what the amendment would really do. That certainly suggests that the legislators probably want those amendments to pass. But you're exactly right, Danielle. I mean, when the vast majority of amendments that they put to the people are rejected, what does that tell you about the extent to which their values and their agenda are really aligned with the citizens of Louisiana? In other words, we don't have a pure democracy in Louisiana. We really can't because structurally we couldn't have that. But nonetheless, it seems like every time something goes to the people, the vote that they make on those constitutional amendments is contrary to what appears to be the prevailing will of the Louisiana legislature. So they're really not representing. And that's a strong indication of the big divide that exists there.
Yeah. And if they're representing the interests of the governor, then it makes a lot more sense than if they're representing the interests of the people with what gets put forward.
Absolutely.
And Chris, just a couple other points here. Some of the people who were named as the governor's special appointments to the convention, to the proposed convention, which didn't happen, are also alarming. One of them is Eric Skrmetta, who is the commissioner of the Louisiana Public Service Commission, or the chair, rather, of the commission. And we saw him in action, and a lot of people probably did as well with some of the clips we put forward last week when we highlighted, last week or 2 weeks ago, whenever we talked about what happened at the most recent Public Service Commission, where the commission completely declined to require Meta to show its work about how are these permanent jobs going to be created, how many of these jobs are going to be created, and how much energy, what's driving your energy need estimates. That all got struck down under the chairmanship of Eric Skrmetta, and I know you have plenty to say about it. I'll just say here what we were able to find that's in addition to that. So there have been multiple reports of alleged conflicts of interest and ethical issues for Mr. Skrmetta. These include Public Service Commission approval of hundreds of thousands of dollars in ratepayer-funded contracts to Scott McQuaig, a longtime personal attorney, business partner, and co-founder of nonprofits with Skrmetta. Co-founder of nonprofits with Skrmetta. We should probably look into that. Without Skrmetta recusing himself. It also says there was a 2014 email from a solar industry lobbyist describing an expected exchange of policy support, which would have been net metering rules, for campaign backing, meaning campaign funding. Some substantial campaign contributions from regulated industries. You've you've talked directly to this before. They're utilities, telecom, and inmate phone companies, which that to me also says, this is another aspect of the private prison system that we despise so much. And then it goes on to say criticisms framing his actions as pay-to-play, unethical, or borderline illegal. Skrmetta has denied wrongdoing and characterized some attacks as politically motivated. But this is one of the people who Landry would have appointed with all of these ethical questions, to say the least, would have appointed to be working on the future constitution for the state of Louisiana.
Essentially to help rewrite it. And so the quid pro quo and the corruption there and the specter of it is just absolutely disgusting. It's disgusting, and you articulated it very well. And as we talked about last week, most recently, Danielle, Eric Skrmetta, led the charge in the Public Service Commission to conceal very, very important empirical data being used to justify all these grandiose numbers of all these jobs that are going to be created in Louisiana because of these data centers coming down the line. Meta doesn't have to produce their numbers, their empirical data, how they arrived at these figures, nor do they have to show how much energy this is all going to require so that Louisiana ratepayers can rest assured that these costs are not going to be offloaded onto them at some point. No verification whatsoever. Just take it at your word. Take them at their word. We're going to cover for them. And if you want to find out some real information, as J.P. Couson said, just go read it in the newspaper, Danielle. Go find it in the newspaper, and that's all you need to know. So I think that's why Mr. Skrmetta would be a choice of someone to lead or to be involved in the rewriting of the Constitution. I don't think that's a very, very good choice at all. And I don't think that it breeds confidence on the part of Louisiana citizens that this is going to be a clean, transparent, fair process.
No. And what strikes me, Chris, is that the elected officials in this state do want to see their compensation packages written into law. But they want us to live with pledges with respect to how much electricity is going to be generated and how much money we're going to have to pay to generate electricity for multi-trillion-dollar companies, and also, want us to live with the fact that eminent domain has not directly been used for anyone, right? But it's just the threat of eminent domain. They're not actually using eminent domain, just the threat of eminent domain. So we don't need to ban that for you little peasants either.
Yeah, we can just hold eminent domain over landowners' heads like a cudgel and basically threaten them and make sure they know we can use it if we have to. But we've never used it. We've never actually had to use it. Well, I wonder why. I wonder why you've never actually had to use it, if that is in fact the case, but and to your other point, Danielle, so our legislature and our governor can make every effort to codify in law pay raises for every statewide elected official in Louisiana annually going forward, and perks, substantial pay raises and perks. That'd be codified in law, while Louisiana citizens get to sit here and guess and trust these big data centers and trust Meta that we're going to have all these jobs and that Louisiana citizens are not going to have their electricity rates go up by 20, 30, 40%, which Chris Justin, who absolutely knows what he's talking about, suggested is probably going to be the case going forward. So, the double standard here is absolutely unbelievable.
Yeah. Another person that would have been, or that was on the list of appointees to this proposed constitutional convention, Chris, was former Secretary of State Kyle Ardoin. And I just find that astonishing. I mean, I know that Landry appointed him to a chief position inside of his administration, but what are some of the ethical issues that you've seen with Mr. Ardoin?
Well, it was broadly reported, Danielle, that Kyle Ardoin, while he was Secretary of State, essentially tried to rig the bid for a $100 million election system in Louisiana so that only Dominion voting systems could satisfy it. Apparently, the vendor that he wanted. Well, one of the other election vendors, I think it was ES&S, objected to that. They sent all the information to the state procurement office, and twice the state procurement office suspended that bidding process because it appeared as though it was being rigged by Ardoin in favor of one company, which you simply can't do. And Sharon Broome said that publicly. The then state senator, Sharon Hewitt Sharon Hewitt, not Sharon Broome, said basically the same thing. What are you doing here? This is not transparent, and this cannot go forward. Well, so 2 of those efforts were shut down, and then not long before Kyle Ardoin decided he wasn't going to seek re-election, was trying to do it apparently a 3rd time and was unable to do it because of his untimely ending of his tenure at the Secretary of State's office. So that's who we're dealing with there. We also know that Kyle Ardoin, and there are emails demonstrating this, and we've talked about it before, that his office, in collusion with the National Association of Secretary of States, was colluding with big tech and with federal officials to shut down online speech that they didn't like regarding opinions about elections and the security of our elections. There's no doubt they were reporting constitutionally protected speech to big tech and to the feds in an effort to shut that speech down. So that's a public official who is trying to police constitutionally protected speech in Louisiana. And now he was one who was going to be chosen and handpicked to help rewrite the Louisiana Constitution. It makes no sense.
No, it doesn't make any sense, Chris. And there's a 3rd person that we wanted to point to here on Governor Landry's list, and that is Sharon Westenbroom. And she was the former mayor, I believe, Chris, of East Baton Rouge Parish.
Yes.
And there's been plenty of swirling of allegations around people in that administration. I don't know if it's touched her, but it has touched the superintendent of East Baton Rouge Parish Schools. That made national headlines.
Multiple people in the executive branch of Broome's administration have been indicted for all kinds of things: malfeasance, kickbacks, misuse of public funds, not the least of which was Courtney Scott, who was Sharon Broome's chief administrative officer, who was under indictment for precisely some of the things that I just mentioned. There was a report on WBRZ, I believe, that Mayor Broome, while in fairness, she's not been indicted or charged with anything as yet, she may be a target of the probe as well. But at a minimum, we can say that there was a shroud of corruption around her administration. No question about it. And yet she also is one who would have been chosen to help rewrite the Louisiana Constitution. I think we can find better people than this, especially when 141 of the people who already will be participating in it are elected legislators who are bought and paid for essentially by the governor, bound by him, scared to death to challenge him on anything of substance, and exercise very, very little oversight over the governor in the state of Louisiana. So really, we're talking about a convention here where the governor goes in and essentially has the authority and the power to do basically whatever he wants to do to the Louisiana Constitution. None of this is very, very comforting.
No, and look, all we can do is look back and say God's so merciful, Chris, because we didn't know that at that time, we had no idea what we were in for. We were uncomfortable. We were unhappy. I was very adamantly against it. You had very strong concerns as well. But we had no idea the depth of what we would have actually been getting into at that time. And I'm so thankful that we didn't actually have to find out.
Absolutely, Danielle. And just so our viewers will know, these 3 people that we've mentioned here today, these are a snapshot. There are other people, lay people, who were chosen and would have been very instrumental in rewriting the Constitution, who are also on the list, who have significant problems in their own right. Not all. There are some good people who were chosen, but a number of them are very, very questionable. And why would a governor who is committed to transparency, who is committed to building trust among Louisiana citizens, would make some of these choices, once again, I think is very incongruous with all of the things that he championed, all of the things that he proclaimed, and all of the things that he promised, both in his campaign and even in his inaugural address. It's very difficult to reconcile the reality of what has occurred and is occurring on the ground, in this case with regard to the Louisiana Constitution, with what the governor said over and over again in order to get elected.
Yeah, and Chris, Katie's in the chat. She said that the show failed on X as well, and she said you think y'all were talking about elections the way the feed keeps freezing and others going down. I've gotten a couple texts saying that Rumble is struggling as well. So we will be posting this full episode to all of the usual channels. But thank you if you're sticking with us on Rumble. Thank you. Maybe hit refresh if you have trouble. But we're gonna just power through. There's just one more topic we wanted to cover today, and I think we can do it relatively quickly. This is one that's been so shocking to me, Chris, that I can barely stand myself. So there were some out-of-state appointments that Governor Landry made to his cabinet, which I find unnecessary. I find it extremely unnecessary. What that tells me is you don't believe that we have the talent in state to fill these very critical positions that are going to direct the future of our state in those particular industries, in those particular areas that need oversight. The first one is a young woman named Madison Sheehan. She was named Secretary of the Louisiana Department of Wildlife and Fisheries. Now, this is sportsman's paradise, Chris. There are probably, can you think, there are so many people who hunt, who fish, who are part of incredible organizations like Ducks Unlimited, people who really care about conservation of the wildlife of this state in an appropriate way, understand the native species to the state, understand what's required for their habitat and when they're actually hunted, when they're actually fished, understand what it takes to cultivate those environments, what keeps these animals healthy and coming back and thriving. Now, you tell me if you think this young woman is qualified to do that job for sportsman's paradise. She was 26 years old when she's appointed to this. She's from Ohio. She's not from Louisiana, never lived in Louisiana before. Now, she came to us she had worked as a political director for then South Dakota Governor Kristi Noem, and she served as executive director of the South Dakota Republican Party from January of 23 to January of 24. She had involvement with Trump's 2020 campaign efforts in the state. She had no prior professional experience in Louisiana wildlife, fisheries, biology, or conservation management. She was widely noted as a political operative rather than a domain expert. 26 years old at the appointment, she was among the youngest Louisiana cabinet secretaries in recent history. Chris, there have to be probably hundreds of thousands of people in this state who are more qualified than this young woman. Nothing against her, but she can't. How can you do the job if you have never hunted or fished or know the first thing about native species in this state? It's absolutely insane. And I also want to point out that if people recall, I found it very strange at the time, Governor Landry held the Bible for Kristi Noem whenever she was sworn in as DHS secretary. Now, we know that Secretary Noem did get voluntold to move to a different job after some very disgusting and disturbing things came out about her husband. Of course, there was also wide speculation that she had an affair with Corey Lewandowski, who was also part of the Trump administration. I think he ended up leaving his role shortly after she left hers. All that to say, that is where this young woman came to us from. She came to us from Kristi Noem's office. Why is she put in charge of managing wildlife and fisheries in Sportsman's Paradise, Chris?
It's absolutely unbelievable. As you said, Danielle, you can't find somebody qualified right here in Louisiana that actually has a background in this, who can actually do this job satisfactorily. This has political appointment written all over it. The fact that she comes from out of state, adds insult to injury. Perhaps it would be palatable if someone was chosen from out of state. who had maybe some connection to the state of Louisiana, and more importantly, some background in wildlife and fisheries that would qualify them to do this. This is a heavy job. It's a big job. And there's simply nothing on this young lady's resume or background that recommends her for the position. So what the hell is going on here? Why are you doing this?
You think about some of the big issues that have come up during this time, right? We have uncapped wells that are out in the Gulf that probably are affecting wildlife. We had the big diversion, the saltwater diversion that was highly controversial. Do you think the Secretary of Wildlife and Fisheries might ought to know something about native species and land formations to be able to weigh in effectively on something as serious as that?
It's absolutely extraordinary, Danielle. You know what I think we need to do? I would like to do a little bit deeper dive and see if perhaps we can find a political connection. I know you mentioned Nome, but maybe there's something even deeper than that. Who knows?
I do have a speculation, Chris, that I don't mind saying right now, which is the timeline lines up very closely with, you remember the legislators that were all called from the South Dakota legislature for voting in favor of eminent domain for carbon capture and sequestration. That was under Kristi Noem's governorship. And this young woman, I believe, was probably put in wildlife and fisheries, we believed it at the time, to lay the regulatory groundwork inside of Department of Wildlife and Fisheries for CCS in Louisiana. We need to validate that, but that was the speculation, that was the hot speculation at the time, and it makes perfect sense with the timeline.
It does make sense with the timeline, and that reminds me, Danielle, the former Department of Wildlife and Fisheries, I believe under John Bell, maybe it was under John Bell Edwards. When was this particular person appointed?
24.
Okay, she was appointed in 24. Okay. I remember sitting in a committee opposing a bill on carbon capture and sequestration and eminent domain, and you know who was sitting at the table? Louisiana Department of Wildlife and Fisheries head at the time, basically extolling the virtues of carbon capture and sequestration and talking about how this is not going to have a detrimental effect on wildlife, on habitat in Louisiana, on our land. So perhaps that was one of the reasons to call. But even if it was for that reason, to make sure that we had a shill in wildlife and fisheries supporting all of this rapid industrial expansion, you could probably have found someone like that right here in Louisiana, couldn't you?
Right.
I mean, but I think perhaps that's part of the reason, to make sure that wildlife and fisheries was fully on board with this broader exercise in industrial expansion, carbon capture and sequestration in Louisiana, someone who would be a shill and say, nah, this is no problem. It's not going to affect anything that has to do with wildlife and fisheries in Louisiana doing all these things. We're good to go. We support it.
We'll do some more digging, Chris, because I'd really like to know if she did lay the groundwork for South Dakota, then was brought here to do the same thing. That would certainly be even more concerning and alarming.
That would be huge.
Yeah, she only served for a year, so whatever purpose she served, she's moved on. Now she went and she worked back with Kristi Noem over at ICE, and now she's running for Congress in Ohio.
Okay. All right. Well, interesting transition from one government trough to another.
Yeah, there you go. There's one other appointment I wanted to pull out here, Chris, and it is the Secretary of DEQ. Her name's Aurelia Skipwith-Giacometto, and she's born in Indiana. She spent a lot of time, I guess she maybe even was raised in Mississippi, but I would still like to note that Mississippi is not Louisiana. And she served as a biologist and regulatory scientist at Monsanto, and then she worked as corporate counsel and regulatory affairs in some other companies. She has some interest in entrepreneurial roles in blockchain logistics, but then she came to us. Okay, she worked in the federal government as Deputy Assistant Secretary for Fish, Wildlife, and Parks at the U.S. Department of Interior, and then served as director of U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. So I could have at least understood, I guess, if she might have been the one that was put into the role of wildlife and fisheries here. I might not have liked it, but I could have at least grasped the concept. But what I don't understand is why we would have someone who has worked for Monsanto come and talk about what is acceptable in terms of our environmental quality in Louisiana. And this, look, I've worked at Pfizer, so I do get that people work at companies that they don't agree with or later come to distance themselves from. And I got grace for that. But I do find it pretty concerning that Monsanto's on her resume, and I didn't see any public distancing of herself from Monsanto.
No. Isn't Monsanto the company, do I have this right, Danielle, that produces that makes all the Roundup?
They've since sold it, but back,
Yeah,
yes, they were the original purveyor of Roundup.
Yeah,
I think
that's caused so much damage to so many people, and the class action lawsuits that are coming out. Yeah, so that's another huge red flag that she would be associated with that company. But what in the background of this lady that you've described more generally qualifies her to be the head of the Department of Environmental Quality in Louisiana? Nothing.
I mean, her education was biology. She got her bachelor's in biology at Howard University and her master's in molecular genetics. But yes, Chris, I don't know. I would like someone who has some demonstrated experience of showing that they care about the quality of the environment, that they are committed to making sure that people are able to lead healthy lives because of the quality of water and the quality of air. I haven't seen that around this lady, but to me, what's more concerning is that these two key roles, specifically wildlife and fisheries, is a huge slap in the face to people from South Louisiana. I mean, people from all over the state, because you can hunt anywhere. But the fishing in particular, I just find it so abhorrent. I mean, I can name 10 people without taking a breath who would do a better job.
Absolutely. People who live here, people who've paid taxes here, people who vote here, people who've sweated here and bled here, people who have farmed the land here. It's like you've got an abundant supply of people who you could have chosen for this position. But I wanted to say one other thing about the DEQ head, Danielle. I know that there are a number of people who worked in that department, in that agency here in Louisiana, good people who quit because they could not work in the toxic environment that existed in that agency under her. So
wow.
That doesn't go directly to her qualifications, but it certainly goes to her ability to manage an agency in a way that is productive and avoids significant attrition rates.
Yeah.
And some of the things that I've been told are not at all favorable to her.
Yeah, and I don't have a particular axe to grind with either of these ladies, but I do just have the big question for Governor Landry. Why did you feel that you needed to go out of state for these two appointments that are incredibly critical to the health and welfare of the wildlife and fisheries that so many people in our state depend on, first as for their livelihoods and second for recreation? It's also a huge part of our tourism, right? I mean, we get a lot of money, the state gets a lot of money from out-of-state fishing and hunting licenses. And secondly, are you bringing someone in? If you're bringing someone in from out of state, I want to see very strong technical background in environmental quality. I don't want, this is our water, this is our air, this is our soil. This is the very most essential aspects of our state. Why would we be bringing someone in from out of state who doesn't even appear to have the qualifications of someone to do the job, much less someone, at least if you put someone in the job from in-state, they're from the state. I don't know how else to say it.
Yeah. It simply makes no sense, Danielle. It makes absolutely no sense. And it would be interesting to do sort of a broader review of other agency heads in the state of Louisiana and the process by which they were chosen and whether or not they're actually qualified to be there or whether they were largely political appointments. I think it would be probably very revealing to do that.
Well, yeah, and I think it'd be very revealing to see, and if anyone who's watching happens to know this, what are the fruit of these two appointments? What have we gotten because of this, right?
What have they done? What have they done good for Louisiana?
Yeah. So I hate that we have struggled so much with technology this morning, but like I said earlier, if you have stuck with us on Rumble, thank you so much, and we will be posting the final version that's hopefully not cut out at all, both to Rumble and to all of our other platforms, YouTube, X, and Facebook. So people will be able to tune in for that, and we'll make sure that the announcements are made on those platforms for y'all to be looking out for that. But it does seem, as Katie said, when we talk about some of these touchy issues, for whatever reason, we seem to have a lot of tech issues those days. So today
there seems to be a pattern for sure.
There seems to be a pattern. Chris, any final thoughts on or reflections on what we talked about today before I move to announcements?
No, other than to say that I feel very grateful to be able to talk about these issues, specifically to talk about, some of the discrepancies between what was promised by Governor Landry and what has actually been delivered, because I think that people in Louisiana have every right to know, again, what is really going on beneath the surface. Thankful to be a part of the State of Freedom so that we can deliver this to Louisiana citizens, because as I always say, Danielle, knowledge indeed is power. It
is, Chris. It is. And look, I don't know if we can say this too much. We don't take joy in bringing this forward. We would love it if Governor Landry was keeping his word. We would love it if Louisiana was thriving in a way that didn't railroad the people of this state. That economic development was actually netting real jobs and producing real value. But that's not what we're seeing, and so here we are, and we're here, and we're committed to telling the truth, and that's why we're doing it. We're not doing it because we have an axe to grind with anybody.
Exactly. We're doing it because we have a responsibility to make sure that the public is adequately and appropriately informed on matters that directly affect them. That's what we're about. That's what we're doing, and we're going to continue to do it with zero apology.
Yeah. Absolutely. All right. Well, announcements up. Tomorrow is Warrior Wednesday, and we will be taking on a recent law that has taken effect and is hurting small businesses and consumers. So y'all will want to tune in for that. And if you are a small business or a consumer that happens to be affected by this issue of it's the debit card fee that got outlawed, which makes no sense whatsoever. Anyway, we'll dig into that tomorrow, but feel free to call in tomorrow if you are in the Warrior Circle. If you're in the Warrior Circle, you have the phone number for the Freedom Phone, and if you don't, reach out and we'll get it to you. But you can call in anytime after 10:30, and we will be doing open call-ins for either this issue or any other issue you want to talk about. And if you haven't joined the Warrior Circle, we would love for you to do that. You can do it at join.freedomstate.us. It's right there on our website at freedomstate.us. You can join there. And for the small amount of $10 a month, you will be helping the State of Freedom and getting some perks as well. And then Thursday, Paul Hurd will be back with us, and he will be talking about judicial redistricting and the role of race cropping up in redistricting yet again.
Huge.
So this is going to be a very big one, and he, as always, is on the cutting edge of it and will be breaking it down for us in very clear terms. So we'll look forward to hearing from him as well.
Absolutely. And I want to remind everyone to join LCAG, Louisiana's Watchdog Group. We're fighting giants, from NDAs to carbon capture and sequestration to everything else that directly affects Louisiana citizens. Big fights coming up. So Go to lacag.org, become a monthly supporter, monthly subscriber. The amount doesn't matter, but we are leveling the playing field against these big special interest groups to make sure that you have a voice that matters in our Louisiana legislature. We accept no special interest donations or support, only individual Louisiana citizens across the state. So invest in us and help us to continue to build and continue to grow so that we can be your voice in the Louisiana legislature going forward. It's such a privilege to be able to be so.
Yeah, it absolutely is. And if you are a business and interested in advertising with the State of Freedom, you can just drop us a line, chris@lacag.org or Danielle@freedomstate.us. We'd love to talk to you about your product or service. We would love to get you on board. And then
we're exploding across the state, Danielle. So if you have a business, a nonprofit, a dream, and you want citizens from across Louisiana to know about it, and our viewers are loyal. Our viewers trust us if we built it over 3 or 4 years. So recommendations that we make are generally followed. So it will make a difference in your ability to expand and grow your business, your nonprofit. If you advertise with the State of Freedom, it would be a privilege to have you.
100%. And then one last announcement, the Storm Summit is coming up in a couple weeks now. Can't believe how soon it's going to be here. September 10th through 13th. Go to stormsummit.us if you would like to join. The speaker lineup is absolutely incredible. Y'all will love it, and Chris and I will be there covering it live. So we'd love to see you there. If you are planning to go, drop us a line and let us know, so we'll be keeping an eye out for you there, because it's going to be a pretty packed house. And I think
absolutely.
Chris, with that,
well, Danielle, it is going to be an exciting Warrior Wednesday tomorrow to talk about these swipe fees where small businesses in Louisiana are no longer allowed under the new law to offload or to pass on costs that they have that are being imposed on them by their processor, by the bank, pass those costs on to their customers. They can no longer do it. And from what I've looked at, Danielle, this is a significant amount of money that is going to be lost by small businesses in Louisiana that they simply are not going to be able to recover unless they just raise prices across the board, which affects every one of their customers, not just those who use debit cards. So this is a big thing. It's fancy as a consumer protection bill, but it really isn't. And I'm looking forward to talking about that.
Yeah. It is an issue that will get a lot of people hot under the collar. I've been mad about it since I first read it in the black and white, and I haven't really calmed down about it since then.
Danielle, that was one of the ones that stuck in your craw as much as any other bill that you and I looked at.
Yeah, and I'll get more into that tomorrow. Well, Chris, God bless you, sir. We've had a long show today, and now we've got to go and make sure that people can actually watch it because the feed failed on so many platforms.
Well, they'll be able to find it, no question, and I will see you bright and early tomorrow morning for Warrior Wednesday.
Sounds great. Talk to you soon, Chris. See you in the morning.
I went to Red Zeppelin yesterday with my second oldest son, Eli, and I got this large veggie pizza, which is the best in Baton Rouge. Red Zeppelin is the best kept secret, but because of us, it's really not a secret anymore. Anybody who has not been to Red Zeppelin on Perkins Road in Baton Rouge, you're truly missing out. The best environment, the best service, and the best pizza in the state of Louisiana. Go to Red Zeppelin today. Tell them the State of Freedom sent you. Blanco Brothers has been in business in Louisiana for about 30 years now. I have personal experience with this company, and I know others who have as well. If you have a business or a home and you've got roofing, gutter, sheet metal issues at all, one number you need to know, and that's Blanco Brothers Construction. He will treat you right financially, and he will take very good care of you with regard to the quality of the service that he provides. I cannot recommend Blanco Brothers Construction more highly enough. Memorize the number 225-226-4222. Blanco Brothers Construction, the very best in the business.
Thanks for joining us today on the State of Freedom. Any follow-up actions, resources, and links to our sponsors will be in the show notes. All calls to action can be taken at lacag.org. That's LACAG.org.
To learn more about our work, become a monthly subscriber, supporter, or advertiser at freedomstate.us. The State of Freedom, the #1 conservative